All right, welcome back, everyone, to Applied Wisdom. You know what we're all about here, right? Getting a little bit wiser, a little bit better equipped to handle whatever life throws our way. And, well, today we've got a really cool set of tools to add to our mental toolbox.
Tools, that's a great way to put it. We're always looking for those practical takeaways, the stuff that we can actually use in our daily lives.
Exactly, and that's what makes The Great Mental Models Volume 2 such a fascinating read. You see physics, chemistry, and biology in the title, and you might think, oh, this is going to be way over my head. But honestly, it's all about grabbing these really fundamental principles from the hard sciences, stripping away the jargon, and seeing how they apply to, well, everything.
You hit the nail on the head there. So much of what we struggle with, whether it's making decisions, understanding other people, or just getting stuff done, comes down to these patterns that repeat themselves across different areas of life.
Right. So like the book says, if we can spot those patterns and understand the underlying principles, it's like having a cheat sheet for navigating complexity. So let's dive into some of these models, shall we? Starting with physics.
Sounds good. Now, when most people think physics, they think equations, labs, all that intimidating stuff. But trust me, there are some surprisingly practical gems in here.
Totally. Like take leverage, for example. We all know what a lever does, right? You apply force to one end and it amplifies that force on the other end. You can move a much heavier object than you could with just your bare hands.
And that's the beauty of applying that concept as a mental model. It gets you thinking about where those high leverage points are in your own life. You know, those areas where a small, well-directed effort can create a huge impact.
So instead of just grinding away and pushing against a wall, you start to ask, okay, where can I apply my energy to get the most bang for my buck? Whether it's learning a specific skill, building a key relationship, or just figuring out the most impactful step to take in a project.
Exactly. It's about being strategic with your efforts. And speaking of getting things moving, let's talk about inertia.
Ooh, inertia, right. That tendency for things to stay at rest unless acted upon by a force. Physics is explaining why it's so hard to get off the couch sometimes.
Well, there's that. But on a serious note, understanding inertia can be incredibly insightful. It helps explain why it can be so tough to start new habits, change old patterns, or even just get started on a task that feels daunting. That resistance is real, but so is the force that can overcome it.
So true. And it makes you think, what's that force that's going to get me unstuck? Is it accountability? Is it breaking things down into smaller steps? Is it finding a way to make the task more enjoyable? There's always a way, right?
Always a way. And, you know, sometimes we need to shift our perspective a bit. And that's where the concept of relativity comes in.
Relativity. Okay, now we're getting into Einstein territory, right?
Not quite that complex, but the core idea is still incredibly powerful. Relativity, in this context, is about understanding that everyone sees the world from their own unique frame of reference.
Yeah, that's so important in relationships, right? You can be looking at the exact same situation but have totally different interpretations based on your individual experiences and values.
Absolutely. And realizing that can be a game changer in how we communicate and interact with others. Instead of assuming your perspective is the right one, you start to consider the other person's frame of reference.
So it's less about judging and more about understanding. I like that. Okay, before we move on from physics, there's one more model that's kind of a downer but also incredibly important. Entropy.
Ah, yes, the concept of entropy. It basically tells us that things tend towards disorder unless we put in the effort to maintain them.
So, like, my messy desk isn't my fault. It's just the laws of physics at play.
Well, you could use that excuse, but you still have to tidy it up eventually. And that's the key takeaway from entropy. It's a reminder that maintaining order, whether it's in our physical spaces, our skills, our relationships, or even just our mental state, requires ongoing effort.
Makes sense. We have to constantly push back against the natural tendency for things to fall apart. All right, ready to switch gears and move on to chemistry?
Absolutely. Let's dive into the world of reactions and interactions.
So one of the first models the book talks about is catalysts. And I love this one because it's all about how certain things can speed up processes without being consumed in the process.
It's like that secret ingredient that unlocks a whole chain of events. And that's where it gets really interesting to apply this to our own lives. Think about the people, the experiences, or even the resources that act as catalysts for your growth.
Maybe it's a mentor who pushes you to step outside your comfort zone, or a book that completely changes your perspective, or even a challenging experience that forces you to develop new skills.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, once you start thinking in terms of catalysts, you can be more intentional about seeking them out or creating those conditions that accelerate your progress.
I like that. Be your own catalyst. Next up, we've got activation energy. Now, this one's all about that initial hump you have to get over to start something new.
It's that burst of energy you need to get the ball rolling, whether it's starting a new project, launching a business, or even just getting out of bed on a Monday morning.
Mondays. But yeah, activation energy is real, and understanding that it's a thing can actually make it easier to get started, because instead of focusing on the whole mountain you have to climb, you can just focus on that first step.
Right. So break it down. What's the tiniest action you can take right now to reduce that activation energy? Maybe it's just spending 5 minutes brainstorming or making one phone call or even just putting on your workout clothes.
Tricking your brain into thinking it's not such a big deal, right? And then once you get going, the momentum builds.
Let's talk about equilibrium. Now, this one might sound a little sciencey, but it's actually super relevant to everyday life.
Absolutely. Equilibrium is all about balance, that state where opposing forces are equal. You see it everywhere. Think about supply and demand in the market or trying to achieve balance.
Ooh, work-life balance, that's a constant struggle.
For sure. But the key takeaway from the equilibrium model is that if you want to shift the balance, you need to understand the forces at play. What's pulling you in one direction, what's pulling you in the other, and how can you intentionally apply force to create the balance you desire?
So, like, if I'm feeling overwhelmed by work, I need to figure out what I can do to lighten that load and create more space for the things that are important to me.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and intentional about creating the equilibrium you want. All right, ready for our final science adventure? Let's explore some models from biology. Bring it on. Okay, so the first one that jumps out is evolution, particularly the ideas of natural selection and adaptation.
Now, before anyone panics, we're not talking about growing gills or anything like that, but the principle of adapting to changing environments is incredibly relevant to our personal and professional growth.
Totally. If you're not learning, if you're not evolving, you're going to get left behind.
Exactly. So the question is, what are you doing to adapt to the ever-changing world around you? What new skills are you learning? What old beliefs are you letting go of? How are you staying ahead of the curve?
Those are some great questions to reflect on. And then there's the concept of ecosystems.
Yes, ecosystems. This one highlights the interconnectedness of everything. It reminds us that we're all part of these larger systems, whether it's our family, our community, or even the planet as a whole.
And that our actions have ripple effects.
Precisely. So before you make a decision, it's worth considering the impact it might have on the wider ecosystem. How will it affect the people around you? How will it contribute to the long-term health of the system?
It's like thinking beyond just our immediate needs and considering the bigger picture. All right, let's talk about niches.
Niches are all about finding your unique place to thrive. Just like in nature, where certain species are adapted to specific environments, we humans also have unique strengths and talents that are best suited to certain niches.
So it's about figuring out where your skills are most valuable, where you can make the biggest contribution, and where you can truly flourish.
Precisely. And sometimes that might mean stepping outside of your comfort zone, trying new things, and exploring different paths until you find that perfect fit.
And last but not least, we've got cooperation.
Cooperation, that beautiful reminder that we're not meant to do everything alone. Collaboration, teamwork, building strong relationships, these are all essential ingredients for success.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we can achieve so much more when we work together, when we share ideas, and when we support each other.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of scientific mental models, what's one key takeaway you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest thing for me is just realizing that these seemingly complex ideas from physics, chemistry, and biology can actually be incredibly practical and useful in our everyday lives. It's about taking these fundamental principles and using them to make better decisions, build better relationships, and ultimately live better lives.
Beautifully said. And for our listeners, I encourage you to pick just one or two of these models that resonated with you. Try applying them to a current challenge or goal you're facing. You might be surprised by the insights you gain and the progress you make.
And of course, we highly recommend checking out The Great Mental Models, Volume 2, for a much deeper dive into these and many other fascinating concepts. It's a book that truly has the power to change the way you think.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of applied wisdom. We hope you found it enlightening and empowering.
And if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us spread the wisdom and keep these conversations going. Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep applying that wisdom to your life.